My name is Michael Rubino. I'm on a personal mission to make sure you don't get sick inside your own home.
I knew there was something wrong. I'm just so relieved there's something that you can do about it.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Never Been Sicker. I am your host, Michael Rubino, and today's very special guest, Dr. Terri Fox. Dr. Terri Fox, thanks so much for taking time out of your busy day to be here. I know you probably have patients you need to see, so I really appreciate you taking the time here to be with us today.
Oh, sure. Thank you so much for having me.
So the podcast is called Never Been Sicker, right? And I got this whole idea of starting this podcast because, it's really this, we have never been sicker than we are today. Chronic disease is on the rise. It's one of these unfortunate things, despite the advancements in technology and medicine. So just curious, what you see people every day, you're in the field, right? Give us a lay of the land. What are your thoughts on why we've never been so sick?
Well, there's a variety of factors, I would say.
Sure.
So I talk a little bit about total body burden. So if you imagine that you're born and you have an internal bucket, and as you get exposures to things in the world, you start to fill up the bucket. So anything from plastics to pesticides to glyphosate to some inflammation and spike protein from COVID to mycotoxins from mold. And when your bucket fills up and overflows, your system crashes. And that's
Makes
sort
sense.
of where things fall apart. And we have, we're exposed to so much more than we
Oh yeah.
used to be 30 years ago or whatever. There's over 750,000 chemicals that are toxic, meaning
Hey,
cancer
that's something.
causing, oxidative stress causing, that we come into contact with every day in the air that we breathe and the water we drink and the food that we eat. And that is a lot on our detox pathways. And
Yeah.
so imagine those detox pathways trying to detox all these things that have now overflown your bucket. And it's, challenging for the system. There's more.
Yeah. I know it's a convoluted question. It's a deep question. I know there's many answers, but
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you that I'm going to just say the takeaways that I've heard, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but
Yeah.
it sounds like we could greatly benefit from clean air, clean water, and clean food. Would you agree?
100%.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit, you mentioned mycotoxins and mold. Obviously, I think a lot of people here coming to this podcast, they've had some run in with mold. They might be dealing with mycotoxin exposure. I'd love to dive into that piece. How common is it? How many times do you see people and they're dealing with mycotoxin exposure, with mold exposure, et cetera?
Well, I believe I have a bit of a distorted perception because
Okay.
people walk in my door and say, I have mold, help me. Or, a variety of my patients that just come in with chronic debilitating
Sure.
illness, end up having mold. So to me, it seems really prevalent. But I acknowledge I get a distorted view, but I really do believe that it's more prevalent than it used to be.
Okay.
I think that there's, a few things we could, reason as to why, and there's probably a lot of other factors that we don't know about, but the number we've always sort of used is only a quarter of the population is like really sensitive to mold.
Sure.
And I just think that that's growing. I mean, I have so many college kids that are so mold sick and that were utterly, totally healthy, and fine in high school. And it's hard for me to imagine that, like, when we were in college, there was all these really sick people that were just not getting diagnosed. So
Yeah.
I just sort of think the bucket is already full, and, the mycotoxins from mold can quickly kind of overflow the bucket. We know that mold exposed to electromagnetic frequencies lets off more mycotoxins. So perhaps we could have tolerated a little bit of mold in the basement 20
Yeah.
years ago. Now our Wi-Fi is right on it. It's letting off more mycotoxins and we're feeling sicker. A variety of reasons.
Have you seen like that? I don't know if you've seen some of these articles, but basically from Chernobyl, like the reactor that blew up, there's like molds, super molds eating the radiation out in Chernobyl that scientists have found. I mean, it's frightening stuff.
Oh,
I mean,
God.
these are microbiological organisms, right? And just like any other organism, it does evolve and adapt, right? And so it's interesting to see some of the research around, the EMFs and the Wi-Fi and how that might play a role into molds the organism as it has evolved and adapted. But it's interesting, right? And we're learning more about mycotoxins every day, and to see all this come together again, I think is very interesting. And just to you may not have this answer, but just to kind of
Mhm.
understand, you said you might have a distorted view because a lot of people come to you believing they have mold, and then you kind of work with them. How many people believe they have mold around about actually do have mold? Like, how many of these people's perceptions are
Oh,
pretty accurate?
yeah, I would say 99% of the people
Wow.
that come to me, yeah.
Does they're pretty, they come to you, they're like, hey, I'm dealing with this. Maybe they saw some social media posts. They're pretty sure. They're thinking about the exposures they might have had. 99% of them. That's
Yeah,
pretty high.
yeah, those are the ones that actually make it into my door, and that they've probably even got a positive mold test of some kind that I might have them redo the one that I want. But
Yeah.
yeah, and then the other half of my patients come in with just chronic illness, and then a huge proportion of them end up having mold.
Wow. Yeah, it's interesting. Now, let's talk about like some of the challenges with just like the healing process. I mean, how hard is it for you to heal somebody if they're still living inside the problem and still actively exposed?
Yeah. So it's really hard to get better inside the exposure.
Right.
So I always say that I love mold as a diagnosis because it is really treatable. Patients do really great. It's not, you're not going to be like this forever. If you do a really good, mold eradication protocol that's in the right order and at the right pace for you, you'll get better. Now, the other side of it is that if you're still being exposed, you're not going to get better, inside of a house that's moldy. And if you're still in the exposure, that part of this whole diagnosis is the really, really hard part. Because being able to afford remediation or moving and finding a clean space, like that whole part is really, really
Sure.
hard. And that's where we have people like you that
Yeah.
specialize in that side of everything. So you can heal the home and I can heal the person. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, the
That
really
teamwork
nice
approach
ones.
makes a big deal.
Yeah, the really nice cases are when their exposure was previous, so they don't have to do anything to their current home because then they get better pretty quickly.
No, that's great. Now, how many people that you see typically in your practice? How many of you would you say roughly? Because I know you probably don't have an exact number, but are renting, and like, what's
Good
that like?
question.
A big portion?
No, I mean a third to a half, something like
Okay.
that, maybe a third.
And are like, how's that conversation going? As their doctor, you're telling them, look, I need you to get out of here. We need to start treatment. I would just imagine logistically, sometimes it's not so easy to just pick up and leave. How are those conversations going? How are you able to connect with people and really educate them on the importance of leaving and getting them to do it? Because I know in the past I've had some stubborn clients, so I'm curious how that works for you.
So I, I don't think I have a hard time convincing them they have to get out of the house. But if it's a rental, in some ways it's a little easier because
Yeah,
you can usually get out of the lease. I don't do any legal work, but I can write letters saying just the facts. Their mold test is positive. Their test for their home is positive, and they've got all these symptoms, and I recommend that they not live there any longer. And then they can usually get out of a lease.
oh, good.
But it's not easy to find another rental that's clean.
Yes.
So I'm in Boulder, and we had a huge flood, and most of the houses are
Oh
moldy.
man.
So that part's probably even harder than getting out of a lease or
Wow.
convincing them to move. By the time they get to me, I'm like kind of their Hail Mary. Like they've been to 20 or 40 doctors, they've been to the Mayo Clinic. And if I tell them it's your rental, like you have to get out, you're not going to get better, they do usually.
Yeah. Oh, that's helpful. It's helpful to understand, and to just to understand the nuances in the process. Because people that are watching this, it's helpful for them to know they're not alone and to understand what their options are. Switching gears to homeowners for a little bit. I think one of the biggest problems is with the mold remediation aspect is it's expensive, right? I mean, just to call things for what it is. There's no sugarcoating it. It's an expensive process to do it right, to do it properly. And it's probably the biggest hurdle that people have to overcome. Have you had issues with patients where like they're just not getting better? They said they remediated, but you come to find out later or something, you've realized they didn't remediate properly. Do you see that as a common occurrence?
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
it's for me, it's probably the saddest part of this whole world and diagnosis is when somebody goes, online and they get a remediator. So I'm going to, say things that you already know, obviously, but the industry isn't regulated. Anybody can go
Right.
online and say they remediate or they're a mold inspector. And most of us in the field don't really look at airborne spore traps. We know that they're always negative, even if there's mold. And so,
Right.
it's really easy for somebody to come in and go, oh, there's no mold. There's a negative airborne spore trap. And so when somebody has already spent $40,000 and they're still sick and we do an ERMI and it's terrible,
Yeah.
it's the most depressing thing. So, I tell my patients, don't get anybody in your house to clean it, to remediate it, or to even inspect it without asking me.
Yeah. No, well said. I think that's really important too, because I know yeah, I think it's important to be real about the process and what it costs and stuff like that. And $40,000 is not, it's not an insignificant amount of money. And when you spend 40 grand and things don't go right, it's important to understand that you could very easily spend 40 grand and things not go right. And then you still feel the effects of it there. And, I think there are two challenges. One is, as you mentioned, it's not regulated. And so, they could be a pest control company by day and a mold remediation company by night, right? And the other challenge is just the cost, right? And so trying to understand how to cut corners, right, but still feel well at the end of it is a pretty tough challenge. And I think if you don't understand the data-driven process behind that, you might cut the wrong corner and then still feel sick, right? And so it's important for people to understand and navigate that landscape and to hear from a doctor that says factually, hey, look, when people cut corners and they don't do it right, it's really sad, but they don't get better. And I think that's important for people to understand.
Yeah, I actually tell people if they can't afford to do it right, just leave it. Like,
Yeah.
let's put a little containment over it and leave it until we can afford to do it right.
Yeah.
Because if
Good
you
advice.
disturb the mold and there's no containment, no negative air, you just spread it more and you make the whole situation worse.
Yeah.
And so if they can't afford it at that point, I'll just have them leave it until they can and we'll try to build some kind of containment and
Yeah. Find ways to reduce the
fine.
exposure, put an exhaust fan on, put the air into negative pressure, do something, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Great advice. So now I want to talk about, let's just assume I've remediated my house. Okay. Everything's perfect. And now I'm coming to you. I need to get better. What does that look like? What are my options? How would I work with you? Explain what that process is like for me.
Okay, so they remediated with a legitimate company, and we
Yep.
have maybe a month after a clean ERMI. That's
Yep.
the situation. Okay, great. Then it'll be really fun. So I start off with a urinary mycotoxin test.
Okay.
I prefer those because, one, you need to know which strains you're dealing with to pick the binders because different mycotoxins have a different affinity for different binders that'll pull them out. And so then we start phase one. I do a protocol that's in two different phases. So phase one is bind and unwind. And that's really where we're sort of beginning to teach the body how to detox, metabolize, and pull these toxins out. So, by the time they get to me, that bucket is completely full and overflowing, and the body's, detox pathways are not working or they're clogged. There's too much for them to do. And so there's also, not everybody gets sick from mold. The people that get sick from mold are the ones that cannot detox it, metabolize it. And so you have to do a process of teaching and training the body and have it be practiced at detoxifying these things. And so we start with binders and organ detox support. So kidney, liver, lymph, detoxification support, opening up all your drainage channels so you can start draining everything in that bucket, and glutathione, things that help you detox mold, and nasal sprays. And then I do it where you have to be like, I work up on the binder slowly. So there's a whole thing with mold where If you try to detox more than the body's capable of, you will feel more sick. You'll feel worse. And it's because you're actually releasing more mycotoxins than the body can get out in the urine, the stool, and the sweat. And so we work up slowly, making sure that you feel nothing or better the whole way, adding in, different binders and getting up to the full dose. And then once you're on full dose for at least 4 weeks, having daily movements, beginning to feel better, then we can layer in phase 2 on top of that. And that's called kill or be killed. But when you're no longer being exposed, sometimes even 2 weeks and after phase 1 on the right binders, some people start to feel a little better. And then for me, the needle really moves when we start phase 2. That's usually where people go like, oh, okay, oh my gosh, I feel better. And that's, antifungals and biofilm but when I say that is where the needle moves, you don't want to do them right away because you will most likely make yourself more sick.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and I believe there's like this term called the Herx reaction, right? Is that the term for when you start to actually have an adverse reaction to the binders because there's too many toxins coming out?
Yeah, so I call it die off in mold because
Okay,
I don't know, Herx always feels more like a Lyme term, but it's
sure.
either one. And I mean, so there's a couple ways that's easy to understand. One, once you pull in the antifungals and you're killing any mold living in their system, that mold releases its contents, which are more mycotoxins. So if you start killing mold in the beginning and your bucket's already overflowing, you're just
Mm,
giving the body way more of the same thing that made you sick in the first place that it couldn't get out to begin with. And so that one's kind of an easy one to understand around why you can't do more than the body's capable of. You'll just make yourself more sick. And then the way I kind of explain it with binders to patients is it's almost like you start binding, these toxins, pulling them out in the GI tract, and you've got everything on board to metabolize them all, get them out in the urine, the stool, and the sweat. And as that load goes down, the cells in the rest of your body get the signal that there's a way out for these toxins, and they're toxic to the cells. The cells don't want them, and so they'll dump. And so if you get a full body dump of mycotoxins, more than you can get out in the urine, the stool, and the sweat, you're just mobilizing them to different places. You feel worse and you're not getting there any faster. And so I really respect that boundary in mold where as opposed to like Lyme, I feel like, there's some herxing, there's some pain. There's, you got to get through the other side generally. If you do it well, it won't be that long, but I don't think that's true in mold. I think in a good mold protocol, you should feel nothing or better the whole way.
that's awesome. So it's basically if there's any adverse reaction, you've taken too much too fast, got to do it on a gradient. You could have some die off symptoms
Hmm.
otherwise. So it's really important to kind of follow the instructions.
Exactly.
Tell me about like dietary changes, lifestyle changes. Um, you know, uh, I'm imagining we want to stay away from moldy foods. I'm imagining that we might want to change our diet and change our lifestyle, get as much movement as we possibly can, things of that nature. What are you usually walking people through on that side of things?
Yeah. So what I'm going to say is going to probably be a little different than a lot of the other mold docs out there.
Okay.
But I haven't found clinically that a mold-free diet really moves the needle at all.
Okay.
To me, the mold we get from food is like a drop in the bucket relative to a water damaged building that we're sleeping in or working in all day. And so, what I usually generally counsel them is more anti inflammatory. So, whole foods, organic foods if you can, and then stay away from the inflammatory foods as much as you can. So, gluten, dairy, corn, soy, and sugar. And mostly because mold is very inflammatory. It turns on all your inflammatory cascades, and that's part of like the
Mm,
inflammation in the brain, giving you brain fog and that achiness, and you've just got inflammation everywhere. And so if you're eating a lot of sugar and gluten, you're just contributing to that inflammation load. And so if you can just take some of those foods out and try to focus on vegetables and protein, that usually just makes you even feel better along the way. And then, so many of my patients with mold, I mean, I see a really sick and sensitive population, but A lot of them have post-exertional malaise, so you can't push them that hard when they're still real
Yeah.
sick to move much, like, because it'll put them out for 2 days. And so that also I practice in Boulder, and so everybody here is a competitive athlete, so they're all like, chomping at the bit to get back out. So my role is more like, it'll be okay, you'll make it if you wait 2 more weeks.
Don't push yourself
Just
too hard.
walk gently. Yeah, my role here is totally different than if I was.
How about walk? Are we allowed to walk? Because
Yes,
I
you can
like
do
walking. Okay,
whatever
good.
you want
Great.
that doesn't make you sicker.
Fantastic. No,
And
it's
then
good.
you'll
It's
be
good.
able to get back to it, once we're out of the woods a little bit.
No, it's important to cover it because I think it's everybody's different, right? And looking for trying to understand like what can they do without pushing themselves too hard and things of that nature. But I think one of the most really amazing things that you said was, "Hey, look, I'm not so concerned about the moldy foods because when I don't really see a difference between people eating moldy foods and not eating moldy foods, but I sure as heck see a difference when people are in moldy environments versus not in moldy environments, which." Um, Interestingly enough, right? I always said, well, inhalation is one of the greatest routes of exposure, right? And so, not to say that you can't eat a contaminated food, but just thinking about it from that perspective, it seems to me it's like it's obvious that that's a bigger problem, but yet we don't really talk about it that much, right? And so most of the agricultural studies that we have on mycotoxin exposure is from agriculture, right? And so I just think it's really interesting. And we don't talk a lot about mycotoxin exposure inhalationally. Well, people like you and I do, but
I
just, I
do
mean, when I'm
constantly.
talking about like the EPA and the CDC and,
Right.
things of that nature, right? So these
Yeah.
government bodies that we all look up to for our information, I think that's where, we need some glaring updates from. But it's very interesting because I think it's really a valuable point to discuss. I think people need to understand that inhalation is one of the greatest routes of exposure when we're dealing with mold and mycotoxins. And I think it's kind of nice to hear that we don't have to be so restrictive from a diet perspective because who wants to? Nobody even likes to hear the word diet, right? But I think it is cool and important to understand the anti-inflammatory diet, right? Like creating more of an anti-inflammatory lifestyle is going to give you a lot more juice for the squeeze than trying to sit there and avoid every potential moldy food ever. I think I don't know, for me at least, it's nicer to hear because
Yeah.
diets themselves can be pretty restrictive.
Yeah, I get patients with mold and Lyme and MCAS, and they come in and they have layered like a FODMAPs on top of a low histamine, on top of a mold diet, on top of it, and they're eating 5 foods. And so my goal is like, okay, we can't live on 5 foods. Like that's not going to be okay
Yeah.
for you. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think I see a bit of an extreme version over here.
Yeah, well, I think it's a lifestyle thing, right?
Yeah,
It's you can't make a lifestyle change to only eat 5 foods. It's like say goodbye to every restaurant ever, right? You're never going out to eat ever again. You're going to get very bored of those 5 foods very quickly.
yeah,
You need to have a little bit more access, and the more restrictive you are, the more likely you are to just go like from one extreme to the next. I mean, you're going to
exactly.
go from eating celery and chicken to eating cake in no time, right? And I think it's really important to kind of go through those lifestyle things. So I appreciate that. Now, you obviously, well, it's obvious to me, may not be obvious to everybody else, but you've made a course. Okay. So you're trying to help more people. I know you see patients, you're in Boulder, you're trying to help people outside of just Boulder, and you made this course. Can you tell us a bit about it and, why you did it, what's in it, what does it cost? Like, what could people expect from it? I think that would be really helpful.
Sure. So I've been treating mold about 14 years. I've treated thousands of patients. And out of doing that, I figured out a lot of what works and what doesn't. And so, after 14 years, you sort of curate the things that are, work really well and in the right order and at the right pace. And I get calls from all over the world, and I can't see patients outside of Colorado legally. And so what I did was I had people ask me to do this for 10 years, but I created a mold treatment course for patients. And it walks you through phase 1 and phase 2. It's very handheld and spoon fed and, you know, very easy to follow. And it really harps on the not making yourself more sick, because I feel like
Right.
if I'm not there guiding them, then I've got to really make sure that they're not making themselves more sick. And so it goes through phase 1, mold detoxification, and then phase 2. And then we have a lot in there as well about staying well. So you probably experienced this too, but a lot of patients that have had a big mold exposure and have been chronically ill for a while have a certain amount of trauma around it, from, you know, the medical establishment all saying nothing's wrong with you, nothing's wrong with you, and then you feel like you're crazy, and you know, you go through that whole process, and then you know, your home poisoned you, and that's a little traumatic as well. And so I find that if patients don't do some nervous system resetting, that they'll, you know, they after you're better, and we're, you know, we're done treating your mold, and you're 100% better, and you're living your life, and you walk into a building and you get a neuropathy back or some symptom back that you had, it's pretty natural for your body to just panic. And as soon as your body panics and your, you know, adrenals fire and your limbic goes, then you know, you're increasing the inflammatory response of the body to the mold itself. And so it's not that it's in your head, but your head's making it worse. So
Yeah.
if you can sort of separate that physical symptom from your emotional response, a lot of times then that's part of what creates the tolerance and resiliency. So that, because my goal with patients is they get to go live a normal, happy life. I'm not like you need to live in a tent and do avoidance forever. I mean, I just think that's silly.
Sure.
And so, you know, tolerance and resiliency is a big part of that. And some of that is the nervous system resetting. And then some of that is just lowering that total body burden enough that you've got bandwidth that you can go stay in a moldy Airbnb when you're traveling, and maybe you feel a little crappy during, but you bounce right back. You know, like, and I always tell my patients, once you get all the way better, you are never going to get this sick again. You know what to do. Your body's done it. It knows what to do. You know the signs. Like, it's never going to happen again. So we can let the nervous system kind of calm down. I feel like when people first get better and they get another exposure, their alarm bells are really
Sure. Yeah. Well,
intensified.
it's a
And
traumatic experience.
yeah, and it's a
Yeah.
protective mechanism. Your body is keeping you from slowly getting poisoned again. But
Yeah.
but that, like, those alarm bells will calm down over time as well.
No, yeah, that's really valuable to point out, because I think that, you know, I've had clients where, you know, they feel better and they have their basement remediated, and it was a traumatic experience, right? And I'll get a text a year later, or like a voice, you know, one of these videos, and they're like broken, sitting on their basement steps, and they're like, I just had another leak, you know, and
Oh,
they're like, I set the dehumidifier, I wiped it up, I did this, I did that. It's like, all right, woo-saw, you've done everything right. You've
yes.
literally done, like, you knew better this time around. You did everything right. You had a little bit of a leak, you cleaned it up, you got the plumber out, you fixed the pipe, right? You did everything right. It's not gonna undo everything that's been done, right? So you don't have to worry about that. But there's like that real fight or flight response that kicks in, and that PTSD starts to happen. And you know, it was like, I think just having the confidence that everything was done right and there's nothing else I would do differently,
Yeah.
was such, like, so valuable for that
Yeah.
person going through that trauma. But it's like it's a real, like, post traumatic experience, you
Yeah.
know, to go through.
It's always the first thing I tell patient with like a new leak or something is like, you're going to be fine. We've done this. We know
Yeah,
exactly what to do. We know who to call.
yeah,
We know how to treat it. Your body's going to do it faster. Don't worry. It's okay. And then, you know, people begin to calm
yeah.
down.
And then
Yeah.
they can control the controllables again, and everything's, you know, back to normal again. And you know, it's just you have to just, I guess, feel confident that you won't get worse, right? That,
Right. Right.
like, and I think that's really what it boils down to, is like, you have made strides. You've moved forward. You're not going to go back and revert and get worse again.
Yeah.
As long as obviously you take the right steps, which typically at this point you know how to do, and
Yeah.
you're able to kind of move forward. But I think it's really important. So back to the course, so you learn all these things. You learn sort of the retraining and kind of like calming down the nervous system and really dealing with some of the PTSD that ensues from going through this traumatic experience of mold and getting sick, and everything that comes with it. And I'm guessing that's the last part.
So what I have found clinically is wherever there's mold, there's yeast, that they're both fungal, and mold creates all the right conditions for yeast to flourish. And so I always treat yeast in all my mold patients. And that sometimes is a huge part of the puzzle. That sometimes is where the needle moves. And as you know, even the water damaged buildings have yeast in them. Like that's
Sure.
part
Yeah.
of the exposure. So there's a module on clearing yeast, and there's a mold prevention module, and then there's a mitochondrial resuscitation module, because mold is depleting to a lot of our antioxidants that help the body to detox and get them out. And then the whole mold treatment process is depleting as well, because you're binding some nutrients with your toxins. And so then we do repletion of the system, and it's about 30 modules. They're not terribly long. It's very
Wow.
handheld, walks you through every step. It costs $997 to do it by yourself, and it's $1,997 to do it with 2 Q&As with me a month.
That's great. You spared no expense putting this together. It's very thorough. There's over 30 modules.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, because obviously you're going through a lot when you're going through this. So there's a lot to learn, and a lot of different things and variables and nuances to learn. So thank you for doing that. And the cost seems pretty reasonable. So basically less than $1,000 to go through the course on your own, less than $2,000 to do it kind of more with Q&As and a little bit more guided, where you get to ask questions and get those answered. I mean, I think that's extremely reasonable. And then I'm imagining there's going to be some supplementation, and is that included in the price? But do I have a portal? Like, how does that work?
Yeah. So there's a community. There's 2 different communities that you'll be in, depending on if you're doing the do-it-yourself or the guided one. And so there's an area to interact with other people doing the course, and I'll be in there as well. And then there's what was your question again?
Like, there's going to be supplementation. I'm going to learn about it. I'm going to need to
Yes.
supplement. Like,
Yeah.
maybe I'm
So,
sure it's not included in the course, but when
yeah.
I do the course, do I have access to get those things?
Yeah. There's an e-store with everything you need, and then you'll also
Awesome.
get a discount on the e-store. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that clarification. So that's great. So if I can't come to you and see you, I've got this option. I can take the course. If I know a lot already, I can take the course by myself. If I need some more certainty and some access to you, I can take the course and get some Q's and A's. So that's great. I mean, and the course obviously is 30 modules long, so there's tons of value and tons of information in there to really go through the process. So thank you so much for putting that together, because I think one of the biggest challenges is, I know for me, I get asked all the time, well, who do I go see? And that's like, well, where are you? And who's nearest to me? And all right, well, can you get on a plane and go to Boulder, Colorado? If you
Right.
can't, you've got an alternative option. So that's amazing. Thanks so much for putting that together.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, the goal was to get it to a bigger audience.
Absolutely. Yeah, I had this philosophy that it's hard to fix one house at a time, and really trying to educate and create awareness so that people, have more resources, is really important to me. So it sounds like you came to a similar conclusion.
Yeah, exactly. And I have to give you props for starting the Save the Air Foundation. Did I just say it wrong?
Change the Air Foundation.
Save the Air Foundation. Goodness. Which is bringing more awareness and bringing more rights to everybody with mold in the world. And I think it's phenomenal. And I'm happy to be part of it. And I think it's so great that you started it.
Yes. Thank you so much for coming on board Change the Air Foundation and contributing and helping out. It's big mission, lots to do there. And, I appreciate all your support. And for those listening, please go to changetheairfoundation.org, take a look around, a lot of amazing things. We're a 501c3 nonprofit trying to fight for everybody to make the massive change. And so please support if you can, become part of the mission. And thank you for mentioning that. So Dr. Terri Fox, just zooming out a little bit, right? We talked a little bit about mold and mycotoxins. We talked about your program. What other environmental issues do you typically see and treat for? I know you mentioned microplastics being an issue. I know you mentioned glyphosate and pesticides being an issue. And maybe this isn't part of your actual course, or maybe it is, but what are some of the other issues you're seeing? How are you helping people treat those if you are?
Yeah. So the nice thing about a mold detox is that a lot of it will help train your body to detox a variety of these toxins. So you'll end up pulling out, quite a bit of other things. But people, without mold that have a high environmental toxin load, there's a variety. I don't do the same, binders and things, but some of the stuff is similar. So,
That's
the
good to know.
yeah. So like the organ detox support, glutathione, all those things are similar. And then, you can use the humic and fulvic acid are good for a lot of the environmental toxins, and the activated carbon as opposed to the activated charcoal. And glycine is really good at helping to detox a lot of those things. And in clinics,
That's amazing.
sometimes you get a hint, like somebody grew up on a farm and they got sprayed, the farm got sprayed a lot, or that kind of thing. Or you can do some testing.
Yeah.
I see a lot of biotoxin illness, so a lot more Lyme co-infections, and then mold, and then, the environmental toxins are part of filling up that bucket. And so, especially if you have Lyme, pulling out, anything from that bucket is going to help. If you can get those environmental toxins out, if you can get mold out, if you can get yeast out, your body will be a lot stronger to fight the Lyme.
That's awesome. That's good to know. I mean, I'm glad to see that there some of the binders and some of the supplementation is helping the body get rid of other toxins, obviously inconsequentially in a very positive way. And so that's really good to know. So it's kind of addressing, potentially several problems at once, which is great. I know for me, the less pills I have to take, the better. The less supplements I have to take, the better. So it's nice to see that it's not like this big diatribe where I'm gonna have to detox from this one thing and then detox from this other thing. And so that's nice to hear.
I will say it's a fairly complicated protocol.
Sure. I don't doubt that one bit. If it was easy, right, we'd all be getting the answers we needed from our primary care physicians. There'd be probably some mold pill that we would take and all would be well. But unfortunately, it is complex. I do understand that.
It is. The protocol is it's a lot.
Okay. Well, thank you for adding that clarification, and thank you for bringing us through that. So I think it's important to be, we got to be transparent with one another,
Yeah.
guys. You're not going to take one pill, okay? It's going to be
It's not going to
complex.
be one cell.
Yeah. Fair enough. Is there anything else that we need to cover today that you feel like we haven't been able to address?
I specialize in healing the human, right, from the mold, and you specialize in healing the building. And so I always just, love learning more about the remediation part, because, it's critical for what I do. If the remediation isn't done correctly, then my patient isn't going to get better. We're going to stay in this, nightmarish loop. And I don't like that. I don't like it when my patients don't get better. But any other tips around remediation or things?
Well, yeah. I mean, can you any specific questions that come to mind in terms of
prevention? I've read some of the prevention guides and I've created one myself, but any new interesting tips?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. So I'm in the middle of developing something called Home Cleanse Guardian. And Home Cleanse Guardian is going to be the world's first indoor air quality security system. It's going to look at particles down to 0.1 microns in size, so pretty small. We're going to be able to look at different particle shapes to understand what we're looking at, how likely it is that it's a mold particle versus a bacteria particle versus a virus particle, et cetera. And we're going to be looking at this from an area of trying to help people prevent the reoccurrence of mold by understanding changes in their environment. Because I think what ends up happening is when people live in homes, you have these slow, subtle changes over time. And if it doesn't become abundantly obvious to you, right? If you don't notice like a big musty smell, if you don't notice like literally water running down the wall,
Right.
you could have subtle changes in your environment that are happening, but you're not aware of.
It's
And
usually hidden.
the thing about mold is the remediation side. One of the reasons why it's so costly is typically because you got to address like 15 different things at once, right? It's
Mhm.
like, it's never just like one little closet, right? And you're good. No, it's one little closet and one little bathroom and one little kitchen. And then, oh, by the way, all that got into the HVAC system. Now your HVAC system's toast. And so you're like trying to pick up the pieces and address 15 different things at once. And so, there are people right now that have clean homes, or there are people that have, smaller issues. And when we can start to detect these problems earlier on, we're really in a home run situation. And I think that's a really big part of the prevention piece that's been missing. This is the first time I've publicly announced this, by the way.
I
Is
mean, I'm so excited. When is it? It's like a unit that's going to sit in your house?
Yeah, think of like the ADT of your indoor air quality, right? So
Okay.
it's going to be like a control panel that you have at your house. You'll be able to access your control panel from anywhere in the world. Maybe you're in Nova Scotia and you're worried about your property in Florida. You're going to be able to see what's going on. You'll get alerts. Just like if someone was breaking into your house, if we see something going on in your home, we're going to give you a call.
Incredible.
Hey, there's something odd is happening. Are you home? Are you burning candles? What's happening, right? And so
Right.
it's going to be really revolutionary in that sense, just trying to help people prevent. But I think outside of that, the other thing that we're developing,
Wait. Does it have a name?
it's called Home Cleanse Guardian.
Home Cleanse Guardian. That's right. And when do you think it's going to come out?
September 1st is the target launch
Really?
date. Yeah,
That is so cool.
yeah.
All right.
So we have that in the works. We're also working with a company to develop window ERV units. So essentially, they're like, picture like one of those window air conditioner units that you close the window and it keeps the air conditioner in place.
Yeah.
Same concept, but it's an ERV system, so it's constantly bringing in fresh air and exchanging it with air inside. So this is going to be revolutionary for renters, right? Or maybe homeowners, because homeowners typically can install one permanently into their house. They don't necessarily need window units, but they're going to be cheaper than installing a big system. So if you're in a pinch and you just need relief right away, boom, this will be perfect for you.
That's
But
amazing.
it's also going to be for renters, because renters can't install these big systems but still need fresh air. And ventilation is a huge way to prevent mold growth, because as long as we're allowing air movement, humidity and moisture doesn't become stagnant, the ability for mold to grow really becomes exponentially lower, right? And so ventilation is one of the huge issues that we see. And so this will help solve that problem. And I think dehumidification systems, like having a dehumidifier in your home, is an important endeavor. You might not need one if you live in Arizona. I get it. But
Right.
pretty much anywhere else in the world, you'll have seasons and peak seasons where humidity spikes. And if we don't control the amount of moisture in our air inside of our homes, unfortunately, we're going to have mold growth, right? And so that's a big piece of prevention. And
Yeah.
you're not going to like me for this one, but household cleaning regimens can reduce mold growth, because unfortunately, if we have too much mold in our environment and then we have a small leak or a humidity spike, right? That mold that's already accumulating in our dust, that is part of our ecosystem, unfortunately, if we're opportunistically letting it grow and grow out of control, guess what? We're going to have mold, right? The opportunity for it is so much greater. If we remove dust regularly and we keep our houses as clean as can be, and by the way, that means decluttering too,
Yeah.
and keeping rid of clutter, because clutter helps collect dust, helps you not see it, unfortunately.
Mhm.
We're going to make revolutionary changes. I mean, even if like you're in a situation, all those things I mentioned not only prevent mold. But if you're in a situation where you're like, hey, I just need some relief, all of those things will get you relief too. Because as long as you're allowing dust to accumulate, if you're already in a moldy environment, you're exponentially breathing in more mold by
Uh-huh.
letting that dust accumulate. And look, I know that's tough if you're sick. Okay. It's like the last thing you want to do is get out of your bed and clean the house. Right. But I'll tell you, that's where like people get into that like vicious hamster wheel. Like I don't have energy to get out of my bed, but yet I'm breathing this crap in.
Yeah.
And if I don't find the energy to remove it, I'm going to keep breathing more of it in. And so, it's that vicious cycle. You gotta figure out a way, get some help.
Patients who
Yeah,
actually feel better when they do a full like cleanup of their house, and so they're
totally.
even when they're sick and they're more motivated to do it. And I
Yeah,
don't think we said this explicitly, but mold lets off all these mycotoxins and these other little nanoparticles that are
yeah.
toxic, disease causing to those of us that are sensitive, even when there's no mold left in the house. So let's say you demoed the
Hmm.
moldy wet material and you didn't wipe down, everything made of cellulose and, do a small particulate cleanup, you might still very well stay sick. And those things can just land in dust, and they love dust and they'll hang around. So
Oh yeah,
the more you sort of clean, and I'm a big proponent of getting your HVAC system cleaned,
please. Yeah.
and the more just a less dust, the better it is, and less paper and clutter and all of that, then it's always going to be a little better that way.
Couldn't agree more. Let's
Yeah,
just say I had mold growing in an HVAC. Sorry,
yeah.
let's say I had mold growing in a crawl space. If I had mold growing in a crawl space or a basement, that mold is going to rise because air does rise. It is going to get into the HVAC system. Unless you have a really good filter like a MERV 16 filter, which most people don't have, it's going to get in the HVAC system and it's going to get in the dust, right? And so if I just handle the crawl space, but I don't handle the HVAC system and I don't handle the dust, I'm still breathing it in because it's still pumping throughout the HVAC system and it's still in the dust that's pumping into my body 20,000 times per day while I'm there. So I think it's really important. You have to do all three steps. You can't just do one or the other. And if you don't do it in the proper sequence, you are going to spin your wheels and still not feel well. The nice thing about it is, if you do it out of order or something, it's not a big deal. You just have to do it in the right order. So you might spend a little bit more time if you're doing some of the cleanup, the wipe downs yourself,
Hmm.
or you might spend a little more money, right? If you're hiring somebody else to do the wipe downs, and both things suck, right? But the nice thing about it is it's not like you have to start all over again, right back to square one. No, you just got to figure out which was done out of sequence and then do the right sequence, right? And so
Yeah.
I think it's important to address, but it is an important sequence. It is important to do it thoroughly and do it properly. Otherwise, you spend all this money, you don't feel well. And Dr. Terri Fox, as you alluded to, it happens to people, and that part of it is probably the most difficult and draining part of the process.
It's horrible. Yeah, it goes back to like you really can't just go online and hire someone. You need somebody who knows somebody who that they trust and that does a good job, or you can call home cleanse. They go all over the country.
That's true.
It's true.
Yeah. The other thing is, like you've got Hermes, you've got the dust test, you've got some options there. Pick the option that works best for you. There's a couple different things. I think it's just really important that you use that type of technology. Full disclosure, I helped create the dust test, so I just want people to understand that and know that. Choose what's best for you, but the technology behind it, I think, is really important because you're trying to evaluate what exactly it is that you're breathing in, and I think it's really important because, as you talked about earlier, air tests miss stuff sometimes, and I think it's important for people to be able to all the time, right? I think it's really important for people to understand that there's a value in screening your house, and it's really cool because you could correlate it with some of the mycotoxins that you have in your body,
Mhm.
right? So if I've got ochratoxin A, I'm looking for aspergillus in my environment. I'm looking for where is that aspergillus in abundance. I know I have not really ever seen a property or a person that didn't have some correlation, unless of course they were getting exposed somewhere else, and then we were able to find the correlation there, right? So it's like if it wasn't at their current place, it was at their workplace or it was at a previous place,
Yeah.
and they had some testing there. It's like, well, eureka, that's where it was, right? So
Right.
it's interesting to see that correlation pop up in so many people, because I think it really helps validate what they've been through and
Right.
helps them understand, like, okay, I'm ready to make a change.
Yep. And the same thing that we found in the house on an ARMI or a dust test is the same thing that came out in my urine.
Yeah.
It is very reassuring and validating.
Yeah. And then it helps people get the confidence they need to take action.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dr. Terri Fox, this has been such a delightful discussion. You're amazing. Thank you for all you do. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to be here with us, share your knowledge and everything that you're working on. Anything else that you want to discuss before we end off today?
The only thing that I would like to say is that you're not crazy and that I think you should have hope. I really find mold to be treatable. People do really well and you can get better.
Amazing words of wisdom there and encouragement. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. And we'll see you here soon.
All right. Thanks for having me.